Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our briefing on the City of Philadelphia's response to gun violence. This briefing is for press only. If you are not a member of the press, please log out and watch today's live stream on the City of Philadelphia's Facebook page, or tune in to 900 AM or 96.1 FM WURD. We'll begin our briefing with remarks by Mayor Jim Kenney. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. In today's briefing, we'll cover several important updates. First off, I want to recognize that this is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. For more than 40 years, the National Crime Victims' Rights Week has challenged our country to confront and remove barriers to achieving justice for all victims of crime. We join all of our law enforcement and public safety agencies around the region and country in recognizing this week. And locally on this front, I want to point out the critical work of the recently created Office of the Victim Advocate. Earlier this year, in partnership with Councilmember Johnson, we announced Adara Coons would lead the Office of Victim Advocate. In her short time leading the office, she has made critical contributions to this fight. The Office of the Philadelphia Victim Advocate offers a hub for crime victims and co-victims, family, neighbors, colleagues, and others directly affected by crime. The office leads agency coordination, planning, and policy advocacy as an invaluable resource that supports our communities most impacted by crime moving forward. Also want to acknowledge the many ways in which violence impacts our communities and trauma that affects everyone involved. Shortly, Dr. Jill Bowen, Commissioner of Philadelphia's Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, will join us to discuss supports that are available year-round. This upcoming May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and these supports and resources are more critical than ever. On another note, as we mentioned last time, I want to highlight that the city is still accepting applications for the Targeted Community Investment Grants. These grants range from $1,500 to $50,000 and support community-based programs and activities focused on violence prevention and intervention. Special consideration will be given to applications that address the needs of youth between the ages of 16 and 24 and young adults aged 25 to 34, as well as those that show a commitment to collaborating with youth, communities, or other organizations. The deadline to apply for the TCIG grant is Monday, May 16th. To learn more about TCIG, email tcig@phila.gov. Now, to talk more about upcoming events and initiatives that the city is organizing, I'll turn it over to Eric Atwood, Senior Director of the Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety. Erica?
Thank you, Mayor Kenney, and good afternoon, everyone. This month and throughout the month of May, the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Cluster will be engaging with community across the city. We are hosting two events tonight. One is with our victim advocate, Surviving Through Healing, a gathering for those living through pain of violence. This is an event for Philadelphians who have experienced the impact of violence or pain of losing someone to violence. It is a time for connection and comfort among community. The Surviving Through Healing event is tonight in City Hall in the Mayor's Reception Room on the second floor from 6 to 7:30. You can register for that event in person at bit.ly/survivalphl, that's SURVIVALPHL, or you can watch via Facebook Live at Engaging PHL. We're also wrapping up our final leg of our community listening tour for the Roadmap to Safer Communities. Tonight we're hosting a youth-only event, an invitation-only youth-focused event. We also have upcoming dates for May 2nd at Myers Recreation Center and May 4th at Belfield Recreation Center. All community listening tours are from 6 to 8 p.m. and you have the option of being virtual or in person. And you can find registration links through our Instagram at PhillyAlive215 or on our website at phila.gov/CJPS. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jill Bowen for important updates.
Thank you, Erica. Good afternoon. I am Dr. Jill Bowen, Commissioner of the City of Philadelphia Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, DBH-IDS. This Sunday marks the beginning of Mental Health Awareness Month, a time that reminds us to take stock of our own mental well-being, as well as the mental well-being of those around us. The prolonged trauma of COVID, including isolation and fear for our physical health, combined with ongoing racial and economic disparities inherent in our system, as well as gun violence, have tremendously impacted behavioral wellness for the people of Philadelphia. This is true in many other cities around the nation and the globe, but here in Philadelphia, there are multiple layers of trauma that have been contributing to our challenges for many years that have been highlighted and intensified by the pandemic. Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event or series of events. Trauma impacts those who experience the incident, but also those who witness it, who hear about it, who feel it directly or indirectly. These traumas can show themselves in many ways. People may experience physical symptoms like their heart racing. They may feel emotional swings. They may feel fear or depression. There is help for people experiencing these symptoms and through accessing treatment services by calling 888-545-2600. People can talk with a compassionate professional who will listen and connect you to services. Through a vast network of community-based providers, DBH-IDS ensures evidence-based best practice treatments for trauma are available for individuals, families, and communities. But it's not just about behavioral health, it's also about behavioral wellness. All of us are impacted by the multiple layers of trauma that have been affecting our city. That is why we are building efforts to blanket the city with trauma supports by integrating and coordinating our many trauma support programs and services into a continuum, by convening an external stakeholders group kicking off tomorrow, bringing together the knowledge, experience, and wisdom of the city, including communities, people with lived experience, academics, advocates, and providers, all convening to align, coordinate, and integrate our strategy and action plans. That is why we have also focused expansion efforts on our most requested and effective programs, such as the Network of Neighbors, a trauma response network. The Network of Neighbors is comprised of community members trained to support and lead responses to stress, trauma, loss, and violence within their own communities. It's a powerful program that leverages the healing power of communities and provides the skills and supports for a lasting impact. We are actively recruiting to expand the capacity of the Network of Neighbors to 4 times its size and create regionalized teams to support more Philadelphia communities this year. We are also scaling up the Engaging Males of Color initiative, which includes healing through storytelling, and expanding with an Engaging Women of Color initiative this year. The Community Wellness Engagement Unit, already active on the ground, sharing wellness information and making connections and linkages to treatments and services, will expand to be citywide this year. You can learn more about Network of Neighbors and many other initiatives on our Boost Your Mood page at dbhids.org/boost. Boost Your Mood was unveiled around Mental Health Awareness Month last year and has been updated throughout the year. It includes links, phone numbers, expert advice, and much more to help deal with the effects of trauma and other factors that contribute to behavioral health challenges and behavioral wellness. May is just around the corner, and Sunday begins Mental Health Awareness Month. And these supports, particularly around the impact of trauma, will continue to be highlighted throughout the month. We have been and are in difficult times, and it's okay to not be okay. 24/7, you can call 888-545-2600 for information, support, and referral connections. And if you are experiencing a behavioral health crisis, call the Philadelphia Crisis Line at 215-685-6440, 24/7. You are not alone. DBH-IDS is here to help. Thank you. And now Commissioner Outlaw will provide her biweekly update.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. Good afternoon. As we know all too well, over the last several years, our city has been grappling with a gun violence pandemic and a COVID-19 pandemic. The trauma that these events have inflicted on our community members and police officers cannot be understated. So ahead of Mental Health Awareness Month in May, I want to point out some of the services that the Philadelphia Police Department offers. Since 2020, PPD has utilized a 911 mental health script that alerts officers on the street that they may be headed to a mental health call or to a call with someone in crisis. When dispatch is notified that there is a mental health concern or a crisis concern, the call is flagged and then dispatched to crisis intervention trained officers who have training in how to communicate and de-escalate tense situations with individuals who are experiencing a mental health crisis. Acknowledging in full that our dispatchers are the first of the first responders, over 91% of our dispatchers are CIT trained. In addition, the PPD has also implemented the co-responder model, or CIRT, crisis intervention response teams, so that we can make sure that we're getting the right people with the right skills on location. Under the co-responder model, the police work in teams, one behavioral health clinician, one officer, and respond to calls for service that involve individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. Again, the amount of violence that our community and officers have experienced is unconscionable. And I encourage everyone to take advantage of the resources discussed by our partners earlier here in our press conference. Before I turn this over to Deputy Commissioner Dales, our Deputy Commissioner of Patrol, I'd like to remind everyone that this week is National Crime Victims' Rights Week, which is a time to celebrate the progress achieved, raise awareness of victims' rights and services, and stand with our families, neighbors, friends, and colleagues whose lives have been forever altered by crime. Every year, millions of Americans are affected by crime. Many will need ongoing care and resources. The Philadelphia Police Department is committed to helping victims find their justice and forge new healing pathways. We strive to do this by enforcing victims' rights, expanding access to victim services, and providing equity and inclusion for all. If you or anyone that you know of is a victim of a crime, please know that resources are available. Call the Philadelphia Police Department's Victim Services Office at 215-685-1158 to speak with a victim's assistance officer, or alternatively, you can visit our website, www.phillypolice.com, and then click on the Victim Support and Services tab or section under the Program and Services tab. I'd now like to introduce Deputy Commissioner Joe Dales, Deputy Commissioner of Patrol Operations, to discuss what we've been seeing in our pinpoint grids, and then he will be followed by Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, our Deputy Commissioner over Investigations, who will provide updates on a number of cases that we wish to highlight. DC Dales.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, next slide, please. Okay, I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart, year to date as of April 24th of this year, Philadelphia had 151 homicides and 655 shooting victims. In comparison to last year, homicides are down 4%, 151 versus 158 last year. And shooting victims are up 5%, 655 this year versus 622 last year. Looking at the bottom left of the chart, it shows the motives for the homicide. The top three motives remain the same: arguments, drugs, and domestic. And the clearance rate is currently at 48%. Next slide, please. In this line graph, the blue line represents homicides and the orange line represents shooting victims in our pinpoint grids. If you look at the right side of the graph, you will see that as of April 24th, homicides are up 15% and shooting victims are down 8% in the pinpoint grids when comparing 2022 year-to-date total with 2021. As you can see, we are continuing to see a downward trend in homicides and a reduction in shooting victims in the pinpoint grids. In reference to the homicides, if you look at the right side of the graph, it shows a steady decline from the week of March 21st, which was at 41%, through the week of April 18th, which is now at 15%. Next slide, please. As of April 25th, 1,849 crime guns were seized in our city. Next slide, please. And lastly, in reference to the privately made firearms, also known as ghost guns, that were seized in our city year to date. As of April 25th, we are now at 164. So with that, I will now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, and he will speak about cases we wish to highlight.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'm going to be providing homicide updates, as I typically do each of these press conferences. And since our last press conference, police have arrested 11 individuals wanted for committing homicides. I'm going to be featuring a fugitive that's currently wanted for a recent homicide, and I will finish with a couple of carjacking arrest information. You can go to these slides are going to be of individuals that were recently arrested for homicides, and I'm going to be listing the incidents chronologically by the date of occurrence from the earliest to the most recent, or the oldest to the most recent, with an incident that occurred starting with an incident from 2020. And this is Mr. Scott Gonzalez on the screen. And on April 19th, 39-year-old Scott Gonzalez was arrested for the homicide of 46-year-old Edwin Feliciano. The incident occurred on November the 7th, 2020, on the 400 block of West Cambria Street. The incident appears to have stemmed from an argument, and an arrest warrant was obtained just one day later, on November the 8th of 2020, for Scott Gonzalez, and he was just recently arrested. Next is Deshaun Ferguson. And on April 14th, 22-year-old Deshaun Ferguson was arrested for the murder of 64-year-old Yusef Kazal. The incident occurred on July 8th of 2021 on the 3200 block of Moore Street. I previously spoke about Mr. Ferguson as being wanted during a press conference back in September of 2021. Next is a photo of Rahis Sherman. And on April 14th, 20-year-old Rahis Sherman was arrested for the double murder of 17-year-old Caitlin Johnson and 18-year-old Tommy Frazier, along with a third victim who survived. The incident occurred on July 21st, 2021, on the 200 block of North 56th Street. And this case has previously been cleared with the arrest of Arshad Curry on November 29th of 2021. So this is the second arrest in that case. Next is Juan Rivera. And on April 15th, 37-year-old Juan Rivera was arrested for the shooting murder of 52-year-old George Gomez. The incident occurred on September the 5th of 2021 on the 400 block of West Indiana Avenue. This case was previously cleared with the arrest of Jose Cardona on September 17th of 2021. Next is Levar Turner. This case got a lot of publicity last week, and we got a lot of tips. And as had been previously reported in the news last week, on April 22nd, 24-year-old Levar Turner was arrested for the homicide of 27-year-old Hiram Hill, who was the son of a Philadelphia police officer. The incident occurred on January 24th of this year on the 1400 block of West Allegheny Avenue. And I want to thank everyone for all the tips that we received regarding the information on Mr. Turner. Next is Sean Didymus. And on April 18th, 21-year-old Sean Didymus was arrested for the murder of 26-year-old Omar Freeman. Incident occurred on March 6th of this year on the 5900 block of North Norwood Street. And I previously discussed Mr. Didymus being wanted during our press conference back on March 16th. Next is Brianna Chavez. On April 13th, 18-year-old Brianna Chavez was arrested for the murder of 21-year-old Sufjan Gibbs. The incident occurred on March 11th of this year on the 1800 block of Ingersoll Street. The motive for this homicide appears to have been robbery. Next is Thomas Haynes. On April 13th, you can go to the next, thank you. On April 13th, 22-year-old Thomas Haynes was arrested for the homicide of 32-year-old Sufjan Robinson. The incident occurred on March 22nd on the 1400 block of Hutchinson Street. Next is an arrest photo of Zaire Ransom. On April 21st, thank you. On April 21st, 17-year-old Zaire Ransom was arrested for the shooting murder of 18-year-old Steve Green. Incident occurred on April 9th on the 1900 block of North 60th Street. This case was recently cleared with the arrest of 17-year-old Gary Taylor on April 10th, which I announced during our last press conference. Next is an arrest photo of Jelani McFadden. And on April 14th, 22-year-old Jelani McFadden was arrested for the homicide of 21-year-old Zahir Bowie. The incident occurred on April 14th on the 400 block of Manton Street. And finally, for the arrest is Jerry Elkins. On April 23rd, 29-year-old Jerry Elkins, also known as Jerry Elston, was arrested for the murder of his aunt, 50-year-old Nancy Roman. She was stabbed several times. The incident occurred on April 21st on the 3900 block of North 5th Street. Next, I'm going to be featuring some individuals wanted for homicides. And actually, it's going to be one person wanted for homicide. And this one person we have right now is 23-year-old Kyrie Dennis. He's wanted for the homicide of 69-year-old James Watson. As some may remember, this is an incident that occurred on March the 3rd of this year, 2022, on the 5700 block of Germantown Avenue. This was an incident that occurred inside of the bank, the lobby where the ATM is located. And this arrest warrant was obtained on April 21st of this year. And finally, I'm going to be speaking of two recent carjacking arrests. The first one involves juveniles from an incident that stemmed from 2100 McGee Avenue. And on April 15th, 3 juvenile males, there were 2 16-year-olds and a 15-year-old, were arrested for carjacking and assault of a delivery driver. The carjacking occurred on April 15th on the 2100 block of McGee Avenue. And on April 21st, I'm sorry, the next slide is involved. You can go to the next slide, Kev. The next slide is information from 21st and Olney. And on April 21st, there were 2 males, and we've identified them as 31-year-old Charles Young and 30-year-old Amir Quazani. They were arrested for attempted carjacking and an unprovoked assault of a female complainant who sustained injuries from the assault. The incident occurred on April 21st on the 2100 block of Olney Avenue. And with that, I will turn it back to Kevin at the mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Nash, and to all of our speakers today. We'll now move to Q&A for members of the press. Because of limited time, only one representative from each media outlet. We're asking to ask questions. Reporters are asked to limit their questions to 2 or fewer today. And we are limiting questions related to the presentations at this time. And if there is time later on, we will open it up to a second round. Armando is available for Spanish interpretation as needed. And if you would like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function and we'll go down the list. With that, I'll turn it over to Kristen Johansson of KYW. Kristen.
Mayor, this question's for you. Can we please get off of Zoom? Is there any reason we're still on Zoom, these Zoom press conferences, and is there any consideration for us to be in person?
Well, I mean, there are some reporters, you obviously don't like virtual, but there are some reporters that do like virtual because they have the opportunity to ask a full question and they have the floor the entire time of the question. Secondly, we have a large number of people who are very busy who come on to these press conferences that take an hour out of their day to answer questions, and they don't have to trudge down to City Hall and take the transportation time away from their office. I mean, we've come in, this has been something that is being increasingly used in many facets of business, education, and life, and I don't really see the difference in you asking me this question now as opposed to asking me in the mayor's reception room.
Well, I think part of it also is that we just got the limitations that we can only ask 2, and now I'm using 2 questions just to ask you this. We can only ask 2. There's a certain amount of time. There's a presentation, and we all have many more questions for you about this topic. Where it's the number one thing on Philadelphians' minds.
In order for us to give you information, it's called a press briefing. So we're briefing you on the current information that we have over the last 2 weeks on the issue that we're addressing. I don't really still understand what the difference between our discourse right now is or our discourse in a room in person. So we will continue to adjust as best we can. And at some point in time, we'll get back to there. But I don't see how the public is not served by having almost everybody in government who's dealing with this problem right here at the same time, answering your questions.
We can talk about this more offline, but just note the objections of, I know me and many of my Philly press corps.
And there are some people in the press corps that do enjoy it because they don't have to come up here either.
Oh, right. And we, with the DA's office, we're able to actually go, but then also live stream, and you can actually ask questions too in an email form. So.
And you can do that here too.
In an email form?
Well,
And have you answer them?
in a chat form.
Right, but I'm saying we can do it both ways, both in person and then also in an email form and watch it live stream. And that has, and it's every week instead of every 2 weeks. Okay, I'll be
Okay,
done.
so noted.
Thanks, Kristen. We'll go to Kelly Rule at box 29. Kelly?
I will echo what Kristen said. I would also like to see these held in person as well for the same reasons she stated. I wanted to ask about Kenneth Fry, the bouncer that's accused of punching Eric Pope. And we're hearing that a warrant was approved for third-degree murder charges. Has he been arrested yet? And Commissioner, I don't know if that's something you can answer.
I can address that, Kelly. The information is accurate. We do have a warrant, and I don't have confirmation that he is in custody at this point, but we expect that we'll either turn himself in or we'll locate him in the near future.
And there's been some talk from local activists, people that live near that bar and frequent that bar, that are saying that they have concerns with this particular security company showing violence in the past. I don't know if that's something you could comment on and say, you know, if you guys have had issues with them before, mainline security.
I can just tell you that I'm aware of previous investigations where their security footage, surveillance footage has been helpful. I've not heard previous complaints about their security in terms of the people that act as security personnel, bouncers. That may be out there, but it's not been brought to my attention as hampering any investigations. We'll see where this one leads to see if there was any fault on the part of any security company or not. But right now it's just an arrest warrant for an individual.
Can you speak to the violent nature though of the video? I think we've all seen it at this point. It seems like, you know, we don't know what was happening before, what was being said, but this victim appeared to just be dancing in the street when he's like sucker punched. Do you have any comment on that?
I mean, I'll just say it's disturbing at any time there's an unprovoked attack. But I'm going to offer the individual suspect an opportunity to, you know, I don't want to prejudice the case, and he may have his own rationale or reasons for why what happened. There's a lot of violence out there, and this is another unfortunate instance of violence that resulted in a sad tragedy death.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. We'll now go to Isabella Sanchez of Telemundo. Isabel?
Hello, thank you so much. I just want to echo also Kristen's message. I think it would be a great opportunity to do this in person. Ahora, en mis preguntas, Armando, como ya conversábamos, las tengo acá anotadas, pero las leo brevemente. Mi primera pregunta es sobre pues, el arresto del sospechoso esta mañana en referencia al caso de los dos hechos de agresión sexual reportados en Septa. ¿Algún comentario que puedan dar acerca de ese caso, por favor?
My first question has to deal with this morning's arrests of the suspect in the two cases of sexual aggression or assault that took place within Septa property and trains. Is there any updates about it?
Isabel, I can speak that I do have confirmation that our suspect is in custody. I really don't have anything further on it other than we have him in our custody, and he will be, you know, he'll have his day in court. I don't want to do anything to hamper the prosecution, the court proceedings, but yeah, he is in custody.
Isabel, lo único que puedo confirmarte es que efectivamente el sospechoso se encuentra bajo custodia y no podemos agregar mucho más. Él va a tener que presentarse y responder ante los tribunales, y nosotros no queremos impedir el trabajo de la Fiscalía en el procesamiento judicial de este sospechoso.
Gracias, Armando. Mi segunda pregunta, de nuevo en referencia a la violencia en Septa. Se ha visto un incremento reportado, de hecho, por estudios de violencia en el transporte público. Dado este aumento, ¿hay algún esfuerzo de colaboración entre la Policía de Filadelfia y la Policía de Septa para prevenir, ayudar a que este tipo de actos no sigan ocurriendo?
My second question has to deal with the violence that's been experimented lately in public transportation within Septa's network. And there are studies that talk about an increase. And we were wondering if there's any cooperation or joint cooperation between Septa's police and Philadelphia police in order to take care of this problem.
DC Dales, and then DC Nash.
Yes, we consistently work with Septa Police. We coordinate our efforts to curtail all the violence above the subways as well as down in the subways. So if they need assistance from us, we're readily available to assist them. But that question should definitely be addressed and brought to the attention of Septa as well. But we do work hand in hand with them.
And I'll just add, I'm sorry, Armando. I'll just add to Deputy Dales's comment that the Septa Police Department does an incredible job with the resources that they have. They're incredibly cooperative. They help us innumerably just on so many different investigations, whether it's below surface or above surface. They have an incredible video system. And when there are crimes that are committed below the ground, which are areas that they're going to patrol, and we're going to respond down there, but their patrols are down there. Their video and their immediate response from their investigators is tremendous. So we have a great level of cooperation, and we're doing everything we can to stem the tide of crime above ground, below ground, on the public transportation system, as well as on the streets of Philadelphia.
La respuesta, Isabel, viene de dos partes, del comisionado Dale y del comisionado Nash. Comisionado Dale nos dice que congruentemente se trabaja conjuntamente entre las estaciones de Septa y el personal policial que tienen a su cargo y la policía de Filadelfia. Y esta cooperación se da por encima de tierra y por debajo también. Nos agrega el comisionado Nash que la policía de Septa hace un trabajo increíble con los recursos con que cuentan y nosotros nos ayudamos mutuamente. Tienen un sistema de video bastante eficaz para ver cuando se producen crímenes en la red de Septa. Nosotros obviamente investigamos una vez que las patrullas que ellos hacen nos informan, que vamos a seguir trabajando conjuntamente haciendo lo más posible para mantener segura a la gente tanto por encima de la superficie como por debajo. Gracias.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Y Armando, si podrías pedir al comisionado Nash para traducir una vez más el tema de Nancy Roman en lo que pasó en la calle 5, para nuestra audiencia en español fue un caso bien importante.
Would it be possible, Commissioner Nash, to rebroadcast what you mentioned earlier about the case of the stabbing that took place along 5th Street last week?
Yeah, I can tell you that the arrest was made of the offender or suspect in that case. We have I'll be able to send you out the arrest photo through our public affairs so that you have it. And it's a horrific act of violence. He's also been involved, and I believe he's been charged in an additional stabbing of another family member. So his acts of violence are very concerning. This was a truly tragic situation, but it domestic related. We don't know what set him off or what would have provoked his attack on somebody, but it is very concerning, and we're glad that he's in custody and not able to hurt anybody else anymore. Thank you.
Lo que puedo decirte es que tenemos detalles con respecto a este incidente. Se ha hecho un arresto del sospechoso y tenemos la fotografía que puedes obtener a través de nuestra línea de relaciones públicas, si quieres después. Esto ha sido un acto de violencia terrorífica. Involucra un cargo que ya se le ha imputado por un apuñalamiento adicional. Este ha sido un caso de violencia doméstica y no sabemos necesariamente qué fue lo que lo impulsó a hacerlo. Es realmente un hecho trágico, pero estamos de alguna manera un poco satisfechos de que esta persona se encuentra bajo custodia y no puede hacer más de estos terribles crímenes. Gracias.
Thanks, Isabel. We'll now go to Ellie Rushing of the Enquirer. Ellie?
Hi, on carjackings, I was wondering if could you share some insight on kind of the average ages of the people who are committing carjacking offenses? Have you noticed, among young people, does this seem to kind of be like a fad or kind of like a popular game amongst the young people who are doing it? Or have you found that any adults have like paid young people to do this crime at all?
Well, Ellie, I can tell you that we do know that we've had an adult involved with an organized crew, and he was in his mid to later 20s, I believe, and that was involved in the case with Mr. Bracella, George Bracella, up on Afton Street, and they were targeting certain vehicles, and we believe that they were doing that for profit on the vehicles. The age of the offenders has, if you've been watching on these, and I've been announcing ages, I mean, we've had them, I think, as low as 13 or 14. We have had some older individuals that are involved. We've had many different reasons for why they do it. I've heard reasons that vary as far as there was a carjacking because they needed to get home, but we've had many carjackings involving shared ride into people working in the rideshare industry. There's a lot of delivery robberies. There are a lot of people who are doing delivery, food deliveries specifically, that are getting robbed. And it almost seems as if that's a call up so I can bring somebody to my location so I can do a robbery and take their car. They know they're going to arrive at a certain time. They know that they likely believe they're going to have some money. And they do know they're going to have a car and it's going to be running. And we see those frequently happening with younger offenders. And as far as an average age, I would say it's probably in the neighborhood of around 18 or so, with a good number, a fair number over and a good number below it as well. And unfortunately, I mean, we've seen the violence that has occurred on both sides of it. There are people who have fought back, sometimes with a weapon, and they've shot at the offenders. And we have, as I just mentioned, we have innocent victims who have been shot, sometimes resisting or sometimes maybe not even resisting, and we just can't figure out why would somebody do that. As far as the question about, is it a fad? Is it a game? I mean, we believe that there are some indications that social media has been a driving force. We don't think it's coincidental that it was happening post-pandemic and the way that it rose across the country. We saw a significant rise in other parts of the country. It started to really trend up this year, in the beginning of this year, and that's when we put the task force together. The work that we're doing on a daily basis with the FBI and the ATF has led to significant arrests, and I try to highlight them. We're doing a lot of follow-up on those arrests, and I think that we're going to see it trend. I mean, it's been trending down. We were seeing an average of 30 or so in a week in earlier parts of this year, and we've gotten to where we have weeks that are in the teens, but we can continue to see it as a problem. We're not going to stop until we're able to stop it as best as we possibly can. But in a city this large, in any city, there have been carjacking incidents, robbery of vehicles that have been happening well before this whole crime problem got a lot of attention. It's probably never going to stop. Again, motivation is oftentimes for money, sometimes for desperation, and sometimes it may be just to be a part of a club. I don't know what's in the minds of those folks, but it continues to be something that we're focusing a lot of attention, and we hope to get it really under control and to almost stop it as best as we can. Hope that answers.
Thank you so much. And we know that the carjackings have really touched every part of the city at this point, but kind of looking at some of the arrest numbers and auto theft incidents apart from carjackings, it looks like kind of the Northeast and the Southwest, like the 12th and the 15th districts, have maybe seen more incident rates on that front. Is there anything about these neighborhoods that makes auto theft or carjacking more prevalent?
I think there's some correlation between where there's a higher level of crime. Our East Division has the highest level of them right now as far as the divisions go, with over 100 there. And Southwest, the numbers are significant there, and they were certainly driven in the beginning part of the year by the rash of robberies that were attributed to Mr. Akuba and his crew. Where they're happening, I mean, they really are spread out throughout the city. So I don't want to say that there's one area. We've seen them up in the far Northeast. We've seen them in high crime areas, and we've seen them in areas that really don't experience a lot of crime. I think that, again, I think it's important to reinforce the idea that the best way to defend against this is to be aware of your surroundings. Also, keep your doors locked. I don't know how many times I've read the report where an offender manages to open a door that wasn't even secured. And all of these cars today, they have a lock. So when people are in their car just sitting there, their lock should be on in this day and age. And when they're about to get out, they should look around. And if they if they've driven to a parking space and they feel like there's somebody that makes them feel uncomfortable, drive to a different parking space. We know that there are situations where people are alerting family members, hey, I'm coming in, I'm right up the street or I'm right across the street. At least, if you're living in an area that's challenged with higher crime rates, they can do that in order to help ensure their safety as best as possible. Be aware of your surroundings, know where you are, and just don't use the phone in a way of distraction. Watch out for distractions. And then I think that a lot of emphasis or a lot of reminder to the delivery persons is that they can take steps by calling the number, getting a verification that the number that they have for the delivery is the right number. And if they feel something is not right, go a block away, call the number from there and let them know, hey, can you meet me out at a certain place? I think there's other ways that we can cut down on the carjacking by actions that are taken by our public, but we're doing what we can with our help of our federal partners to get it down to so that it doesn't happen and people don't feel concerned the way they do right now.
Thank you. And one more quick other thing. On the Septa rape arrest, I think the alert that PPD sent out said that the man was taken to the hospital. Is that just standard, or was he, hurt when they found him? Or
I understand he may have sustained some injuries. I don't have the nature of the injuries, but I think he's been treated at the hospital, or he's being treated at the hospital, but he's in our custody right now. And we'll follow through with anything else if there was looking at how he got injured, but it was prior to our taking him into custody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ellie. We'll now go to Carolina Rodriguez of Univision.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I have a question regarding sexual violence, sexual assaults. Is besides gun violence increase in Philadelphia, is sexual violence, sexual assault something that it's been worrying PPD?
Well, anytime we have sexual violent reports, that's always worrying us. I don't have the specific counts at my ready at this moment, so I don't want to put out any information that's not accurate. If there is an increase in sexual assaults, I don't believe that the number is high, but I just don't have it ready. But I think that an incident that gets a lot of publicity, such as a public incident like on Septa, is what really raises the awareness. A lot of the sexual assaults that we have do happen with individuals that are known. When we take them all seriously, but when we have sexual assaults involving people that are unknown to the victims, and it takes it's even more concerning. And I think that was the concern on some of the recent assaults that we've seen on public transportation. So I'll make sure that we get you some up-to-date statistics, and I don't want to put out numbers that are misleading on where we are with our sexual assaults.
El comisionado Nash nos dice de que obviamente cada vez que se reportan incidentes de violencia sexual, eso es algo que a nosotros nos inquieta mucho. Sin embargo, no tenemos en este momento cifras específicas que pudiera darte. Si es que ha habido un incremento, sin embargo, este no debe haber sido muy grande. Lo que sucede es que se le da más publicidad a los incidentes cuando se suceden como por este incidente en el área de Septa, a mayor conciencia por parte del público, cuando estos incidentes suceden entre gentes que no se conocen. Normalmente hay agresión sexual entre gente que se conoce, pero más adelante te puedo proporcionar cifras para sustentar esto. Gracias.
Armando, one more thing. Algo más. What would be the advice from the PPD to, our community in regards to sexual violence? How do they should behave or act if they encounter some sort of this type of attacks in Philadelphia?
I think the advice is similar, is to know where you are, be aware of your surroundings. If people feel that they're in areas where they don't feel safe, I think that they should try to be with somebody else. It's so rare that someone is going to be assaulted when they're in the company of another person. So if they can be with somebody else, a family member, a friend, I think the likelihood that anything is going to happen is so much less. But overall, I think that the level of completely stranger assaults, especially when it comes to the area of sexual assaults, is really very small. I don't think that we're experiencing anything more than what we have, but they do occur. And I think just people need to know their surroundings.
La respuesta que nos da el comisionado Nash tiene que ver con el saber dónde se encuentra una persona en todo momento, el estar consciente del entorno, y si alguien no se siente en un lugar seguro o no se siente seguro, que intente estar con otra persona, si sea un familiar o un amigo. Son raras las agresiones sexuales que se dan con gente que está acompañada. Hay que estar consciente, sin embargo, también de que cuando estos asaltos, estas agresiones sexuales se dan entre extraños, son mucho menores que las que se dan entre gente que se conocen. Y no creo que estemos teniendo incidentes más allá de lo esperado, lo acostumbrado. Es algo de preocupación y esperamos que la gente tome conciencia de su propia seguridad para evitarlo. Gracias.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Carolina. We'll now go to Howard Monroe of CBS 3. Howard?
You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, and I do want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues about having these in person and offline. But I did want to ask someone with Philly Police if, regarding this taboo incident that happened there, are these private security companies, are they regulated? And are there any plans to make sure that this incident doesn't happen again? We had an issue over the winter time at Love Park where a private security guard shot and killed someone. Are there any regulations in the works?
I mean, I'll talk about private security in general. I think that's the responsibility of the private security companies to make sure that they know the people that they've hired and that they're trusting with providing security to patrons of different locations. The situation at Love Park that happened back in the holiday season was incredibly unfortunate, and I don't think anybody could have imagined something like that going on. I think the responsibilities really fall to the companies that are utilizing the security companies to make sure that they have people that are qualified and bonded and can handle things right. The security company in this case, what I understand is they handle security for many firms, for many different businesses. And like I said in one of the previous questions, they have strong level, they have security that works to identify the people that are coming in and out of the premises, as well as they provide video, which has been helpful in a number of our investigations in the past. So I think that those are really questions that you're going to have to ask the individual security companies. I don't know. I can't answer whether L&I has any regulation over those types of companies. For armed security guards, there is a state, there's Act 235. They have to be, they're regulated by the state. And as far as unarmed security, I'm really not sure of what goes on if they're not going to be carrying a gun and what regulations they have. We'll have to get back to you on the regulations if there's anything for some, like a bouncer, an unarmed bouncer, and that's what we had, I believe, in this case.
And so, as far as you know, this bouncer at Taboo was unarmed. But is there a framework on de-escalation? I mean, seeing an employee being able to punch someone and kill them, it seems like it would be something that the city could have some framework for these companies to go by.
I would think that the insurance companies that bond these companies would have certain requirements that they have to be met before they would agree to bond the security company. And I assume that the nightclub or business would need to have their insurance company approve who they're hiring to do this. My understanding of over the years from interaction with tavern security or store security, it's their job to get them out of the premise. Once they're on the sidewalk or in the street, then that should end their interaction. And I know people who actually are bouncers who are made very clear to them that they're responsible for getting the person out the door and not letting him back in.
So then, Mayor, what you see there, then that wasn't something that that you would necessarily agree with, having the bouncer go to the street.
I don't think punching anybody at any time is acceptable unless you're doing something in self-defense. And I don't know the details. We don't see everything that's happening before the poor man was knocked out. And again, this is a case that's still being investigated, not been, he's been charged by the DA, but not, I don't know what his status is. But all I'm saying is, in general, my experience is that they are to get them out of the premise, and that should end the interaction.
Thank you.
Thanks, Howard. Seeing as we have a few minutes left, we will open it up for a second round. And so we'll go to Kristen Johansson of KYW again. Kristen.
Thanks. So yesterday I went to one of these listening sessions that's hosted by the city. And what was interesting is although there were like 6 different groups that were being held, they were really having all the same conversations about how they need more activities for kids and places for kids to go. And that there's like a lack of oversight from their parents, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to see actually from the commissioner, maybe Deputy Commissioner Nash, is there any suggestions, or have you talked about how you attract somebody a teenager specifically, from getting away from kind of, I want to say, the lifestyle that maybe their friends are in too, of carrying a gun, getting into that kind of world, and moving them into a world where they would be going, voluntarily to a nonprofit, to an after-school activity? Is there any kind of discussion group training that maybe some of these community groups are going through? Does that make sense?
Is that more for like Erica or
Could be
Catherine
Erica,
Outlaw?
could be Dales, it could be Commissioner Outlaw.
I can speak up, but Erica, want to talk about GVI first?
So a couple things. One, if we're talking about kind of some of the conversations we saw last night, and kind of the theme of what we've been seeing from community members about parental engagement and positive engagement of youth, I think there are multiple pathways that we are engaging with that. From a younger, kind of under 18 level, you have Department of Human Services, who has their intensive prevention providers or intensive prevention programs, IPS programs throughout the city. That are with community-based, community-serving organizations that are familiar with the neighborhoods, familiar with the young people. And so part of what we're doing in order to connect those communities to that positive engagement, particularly for young people under the age of 18, is we are engaging with our community evening resource centers. We are doing some cross promotion with our department and DHS. They are working together with developing a communications plan. We are sharing this information in our community meetings to make sure folks are aware of it. We are relying on you all as media to promote more than just what leads to actually support us and connecting families and individuals with programs. In addition, we also have 211 that we've set up to connect families and those who are at the highest risk to opportunities to intervene in vulnerable neighborhoods with vulnerable communities around the issue of gun violence. For what Deputy Commissioner Dales was mentioned was our group violence intervention. Our group violence intervention is a law enforcement strategy that works with those who are socially networked in a group, or AKA again. These groups, or these young people that are identified, my department helps through the Office of Violence Prevention, helps coordinate with our law enforcement partners on multiple levels, what are called custom notifications. These custom notifications have teams go out pretty much every Saturday. On these teams are our case managers from GVI, mothers or loved ones of those who have been lost, as well as individuals that have been caught up in the game, and our law enforcement partners from the DA's office, as well as from the police department. The message to these individuals, who are the ones who are at the highest risk of violence, is you have a choice here. We kind of know who you are, what you've been doing. We are going to prosecute you and pursue you to the full extent of the the law, or you can take advantage of the opportunities that exist either through employment, education, other support services that are connected through our caseworkers in our Office of Violence Prevention. And so those are two very specific ways that we are engaging with those who are at the highest risk of violence. What we know is that these interventions do work. What we need is promotion of these opportunities to those who need us the most.
Commissioner, did you, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in really quick on that. I mean, from the law enforcement standpoint, obviously, it's about finding opportunities for us in law enforcement outside of enforcement action, creating relationships, opportunities of fellowship. And that's why our programming, whether it's through PAL, is so important, or the Youth Advisory Commission that we stood up almost a year ago or so now. I mean, even myself, I wasn't a gang member when I was younger, and I wasn't out there doing things illegally, but I was afraid of the police. I didn't trust the police. And it wasn't until I had the opportunity to have a positive interaction and my peer group changed, because now I'm around people where it was cool to talk to cops or engage in city programs or whatever it is, that I started to change my mind. So in addition to that, you know, our opportunities have been the procedurally just youth forums that we've been rolling out, and we're hoping to extend with additional funding. And we're hearing directly from our young people what's going on in their lives, how they think our interactions should be with them. And then therefore they're seeing us in a different light. So, you know, obviously Erica's shop covers a lot of what you asked, but there's also opportunity for law enforcement as well, because we see some of these young people at their worst, and we might be that first open door to either contact the resources or to create relationships with them ourselves. And then, you know, basically open that gateway or allow them to be open to other opportunities with the city. So I think there's many approaches, and I agree with Erica in that promotion of these opportunities would be helpful, but we know it's about a conscious decision that a young person has to make, and we're doing what we can to help kind of sway our young people make some of these decisions.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Seeing that we have no other hands raised, and we're almost at time, that concludes today's briefing. We'll reconvene again in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day.